Chapter 17. It was about 6 when he was sober enough, and he bailed himself out with the last 10 shillings he had, and got out of the cold cell, and went along into Darlinghurst Road, and cut through to Rushcutter's Bay, and climbed the stairs to her flat, and opened the door with his key, and walked in. There was a morning chill in the room with the blinds down, but he left them down and went into the bedroom. She wasn't there, and the bed hadn't been slept in. He shrugged his shoulders and pulled his coat off and his shoes and lay down and closed his eyes, and there was no cold impress on them as there had been in the lock-up. His tiredness and drink-sickness swarmed to a knob of wool in his brain, and he slept. When he woke, the blinds were still down, but bright like oiled paper, bright yellow, and they hurt his eyes. He got up and moved his tongue in his furry mouth, and wished he had a drink. He went out and washed himself, and looked at the dishes from last night piled in the sink, and a cockroach with its long head swaying on its thin neck, feeding off a scrap of sogged bread on a saucer. And he looked at his face in the mirror and rubbed his hand speculatively over his stubbled chin. That could wait. He wasn't going anywhere fancy. He needed a drink more than anything else. He pulled another shirt out of the cupboard and put on another suit, a dark brown with a red pencil stripe. And when he was ready to go, she hadn't come in, and he swore curses at her and searched the place for money. Up on the kitchen cabinet, in her closed pockets, in her gray handbag, and out of the tumble of lipstick, tram tickets, handkerchief smeared with red, came 3 pence from the corner. He went through the pockets of his own suit and found nothing except 3 pawn tickets. Savagely he went out and spent the 3 pence on a tram into the city. And he was lucky. Pudden Williams was in the billiard room, and Dano put the acid on him, and Pudden said, Yeah, sure thing, I'll have one with you. And they got away into Clarence Street, and Dano put the first drink down in a few gulps, rolling it in his mouth first and letting it slide down his throat, and taking the rest quickly, and Pudden had them stood up again. Things not going well, Pudden said. Things are right as rain, Dano told him. Just a few days on the lean, that's all. Haven't seen you for a couple of weeks, Pudden said. Been out of town, have you? No, I've been around, Dano said in a way that discouraged questions about himself. Pudden Williams caught on. He switched the subject. I'm on a good thing for set day. Yeah, Pelican, Pudden said. Don't touch it, Dano told him. St. Malo'll win that race. Pudden was slightly annoyed. What's wrong with Pelican? You'll see over the last couple of furlongs I got the drum. There's a swag of dough on him to lose. Pudden breathed out hard. Hell, I was going to slap a $5 on him. Thanks for the tip-off, St. Malo. He'll take it, Dano said. I'll put down half 100 on the race. Can you stand me over till then? Hell, Dano, I'm light on too. Dano speared him with a glance. Thought you said you were going to lay a spin on that nag. So I am, but I ain't got it on me. Jimmy Welsh owes it. I'll get it Friday. What are you worth right now, then? Dano said, irritably, disappointed and a little nasty about it. I can dook you 10 bob. Dano breathed a deep, vexed sigh. All right. It'll have to do, I suppose. Pudden Williams gave him the note, and Dano pocketed it without a word of thanks. Then he said, How about another beer? You'll get it all back next time I see you. And Pudden said, Sure, and laid another florin on the bar. And Dano felt a little better with the beers in him and the little money on him, and Pudden Williams liked the change. "Say," he said, in sudden thought, "I seen Johnny the other day. Johnny who? Your brah, down in the park, still blind as a bat, he is, poor cow. Gets along the street with a stick and dark glasses on his eyes. No, that's not right about blind as a bat. He can see a bit. I wasn't talking to him, but—" "Never mind the gabble, Pudden," Dano said, shutting Pudden up. Pudden shrugged. Tough luck for him. Well, he asked for it, though thought he could beat the world. He might have too, if that hadn't happened to him. You see the fight?" Dano looked hard at Pudden, slightly angry with him. Then he relaxed and turned his eyes away and lifted the glass to his lips. "Ever see any of the others?" he asked casually. "Your old man, seen him a couple Saturdays ago, lowing home full as a boot. Say, that's a swish line Johnny's tagging along with. Bet she'd go well." He rolled his eyes and clicked his tongue. Dano glared at him. "I ought to push your bloody teeth down your throat, you possum-gutted half-wit." But he said, "All right, cut the talk." "Hell, I didn't mean nothing, Dano," protested Pudden. "Just remarking, that's all." "I know, but it's none of our business, yours or mine. I wiped them, and I don't want to hear anything about 'em, that's all." "Okay, pal." Pudden didn't look like shouting any more, and Dano shook him off. "The Warby Dill, what did I ever see in that no-hopper squirt? Never be anything, never get anywhere. And he got a tram back to the cross, and had a couple of drinks in a quiet pub on his own. Seen your brother, so what? Blind as a bat, so what? Gets along with a stick and dark glasses, so what? He could have taken it or left it alone. Nobody forced him to fight. He got to be champion, and where'd it get him? The mob's forgotten him. Sweet humanity didn't roll around and bang on the door and say, here boy, and where's the hat? And let's have a bobbin." Moans and laments by a few in the papers, suggestions. "I think this, I think that, all bullsh." Where'd he think it would get him, even if he hadn't lost his sight? Say, he went on and beat everything they put up against him, and even got to be world champ. Where would it get him? Digging ditches on the bum, like hundreds of 'em. Big names in their time, dead as a doornail now. Never heard of 'em, don't know 'em, who are they? He had 2 more drinks, and there was a fierce irritability working in him, and he didn't know what he wanted, and he thought of the pole he lived with in the flat, and he went down the street, and a man stepped out from the doorway of a barber shop, a tall, thin man with his hat pulled down in front, and he just tapped Dano on the shoulder as he passed, and beckoned Dano closer with a nod. And Dano, startled for a second, put on an easy smile and said, "Ah, hello, Stripe. How they treating you?" "I could do with that 20, Stripe said, without a flicker on his sphinx-like face. "I could too," Dano told him with a light attempt at humor. "I'm not joking," the man said. "That dough has been coming to me for 3 months. You'd better get it." "You'll get it," Dano said, a little truculently, standing over me, "you bastard. I ought to let you have it in your bloody axe of a face." Then he just shrugged and said, "I'm sorry about it, Stripe. Dinkum. Just been striking it a bit rough. But give me another month, and you'll get it all right." "Another fortnight," Stripe said impassively. Dano's eyes shifted. "You were there in the room when they bludgeoned Abby Samuels, and 3 of them bashed him with lead hose and took their lousy 50 out of him and gave him a new face for 3 months for being a Welsher." "Right," Dano said. "If I haven't got it then, I'll take the treatment. So long." He felt himself shivering at the end of the 30 yards, and he went into another pub and tossed off a schooner and got on his way savage. He don't need it, could pass it up and never miss it the long streak. Could wipe it like Andy Shorter wiped that poker debt, and that was 120. Didn't matter if Shorter would never lend you another reso or run up another account, you understand that, but when you had the Oscar and wanted to play poker, you'd splash it at his place because you appreciated his action. He entered the dim building and went upstairs into the flat, and as he opened the door he heard the woman humming a song. She stopped when she heard him, and he went to the bedroom door and looked at her sitting on the stool in front of the mirror. She was putting on her earrings, and her small oval face watched him in the mirror. "Sleeping out late last night," he said cynically. "What do you mean?" She turned, indignation beginning. "Don't give me the holy angel stuff," he said, stepping into the room. "I come back here this morning, and you weren't here, and the—" "All right," she said. "Yeah, I knew you'd be in." She nodded towards the rumpled bed. "This morning, eh? And where were you last night, may I ask?" "In the Peter. I couldn't get a taxi, and I was walking home, and the Johns picked me up." "Huh, that's a laugh," she said. "And what's her name that drank with you?" "All right, I'll let you have it, you bitch. What's the use telling you the names of the blokes I was with? What am I spinning details to you for?" And he said, "She could teach you a bloody thing or two, the same one. And I'm asking the questions, where'd you go?" "That's my business. The Bach School, I suppose. And went home with that greasy, pot-bellied Cherico." He saw the truth of his accusation fleet across her face. "You dirty little trollop. Switching partners, eh? Good time Dano's finished giving the good times." "You're crazy, Dano, you're wrong. How much did he pay you, eh? How much?" He snatched her bag from the table, and she made a desperate wrench to take it from him, but he pushed her violently away and snapped the clasp and dug his hand in and pulled out a purse, and threw the bag away and opened the purse and pulled a roll of greenbacks from it. "Give me that money," the girl snapped furiously, and ran up and made a grab at it, but he slapped her face hard and moved back, and she stood there holding her face, and her face expressing her bitter loathing and vicious fury. He peeled a tenner off the roll and put it in his pocket. "That's half," he said, a hard blaze in his eye. "You can keep the dresses I bought you, the jewelry, the good time's over." "You bet it's over," she flashed. "I'll come good again, and you'll get old and baggy. Your chin's slipping a couple of notches now. There'll be good times for me, but you won't be in on them. You're wiped, and so are you, just the shiny bob, ain't you? And don't think Chirico's the only one I've been around with, either, if you only knew." She didn't inflame him. If she had, he wouldn't have let her see it. "Yeah," he said, "and so have I been around, but I don't pay the pieces I go with. I paid you, though, and you've been holding out on me." "Well, let's see." He opened the purse and took the rest of the money and threw the purse open at her feet. "This'll help to even it up a bit." She poured out a torrent of profanity, wild, robbed, and struck at him, and he clipped her on the jaw, and she fell on the floor and lay still. He got a suitcase and threw his shirts and his second suit into it, and an extra pair of shoes. "Wait a minute. Where are you going? You could have stayed here and let her work on the night shift. Buttered her up, honeyed her, and let her bring the dough in, and got out when you were flush again." "No, she'd throw you." It's been in her voice and manner for weeks, the coldness now and then, the little squabbles. "All right, while you played Santa Claus, but to hell with you now, it was coming. She would have given you the brush off, but you'd beaten her to the punch. Get out and forget the crumpet. Plenty more. Sick of her anyway." He walked around and looked at her. She was still out, and he felt a little fear tingle in his stomach. He saw that she was breathing, and as he watched she stirred slightly, and a moan passed her lips. And listen, she might run to the coppers. and tell them you robbed her. She'd do that. She'd get the cobber on, and bolt like hell, and yell police, and they'd be on you. And they'd fit you quick. Why go to jail over a bitch like that? She stirred and rolled over on her back, gasping feebly, and her dressing gown parted, and she had nothing on, and he looked at her thighs and to her face, and her eyes fluttered open. He pulled the roll from his pocket and let the notes fall like leaves over her, and pulled the key out of his pocket and dropped it beside her. He got his port and looked down at her again, contemptuously, and she was still dazed and white-faced, but her eyes were bitter and hating. He took a belittling, calculated sight of her nakedness, and he strode to the door and slammed it behind him. He didn't know where he'd go, but he let that resolve itself, and he ended up going into Chris Casamata's cafe. Chris was delighted to see him. "Where you been this long while, Dano? I have not seen you, and I think you are sick maybe. It is so good to see you again." "I want to get a shave and a clean-up, Chris. Then I'll have a yap with you. You don't look so good," said Chris sympathetically. Dano was on his toes. "Neither would you if you'd been sleeping in parks for a week." "Sleeping in parks? Geez, what for? Are there no places, rooms?" "Plenty, but you ever heard of a thing called rent, Chris?" Dano let Chris Hart turn that over and do the rest, and it was only a matter of a few seconds' wait, Chris looking at him and feeling for him. "Why didn't you come to me? If you're stony and out, I could lend you some money, hear how much you want." He pulled a $5 from the till, then a tenner. "This do, or you like more maybe." He looked at Dano, and Dano's indecisiveness prompted him to pull out another tenner, and he closed the till. He put the money on the counter, shrugging his shoulders in reproach. "What friends for if they cannot help in trouble, eh?" "Well, it's good of you, Chris, thanks. And listen," Chris went on, "what about you stay with me? I got a room here, and nobody uses it. I don't want no rent, neither." "Well, I don't know," Dano pretended, giving the impression he didn't want to be a burden. "Ah, come on," Chris urged. "You be good for me here, too." Dano finally let himself be persuaded, and Chris took him up to the room, small with a stretcher and a pile of boxes in it. Chris said he could clean all that junk out and make it tipsy-topsy, and Dano thought, do me for a while anyway, till I come good. And he thought, hell, I never thought I'd be around this burger again. But he consoled himself with the belief that it wouldn't be for long. Chris showed him the bathroom and gave him the use of his own shaving kit and left Dano alone. And Dano thought, bloody mug softy all right. Thought he'd come across. Didn't even have to ask him as I thought I might. Just set the trap and he catches himself. Dump left it all behind. Shouldn't it be here? Left it all behind months ago, but it'll do for a while. He kept talking to himself on that theme while he shaved, depressed and irritated by his depression. Then finally convincing himself that it was only a makeshift, and he thought, 20 quid, I can make that grow. Poker at Andy's, the Swy School, Bach, the GG's, money, that's what I want, and quick. Swy School's out. If I go there, McMurtry won't give me any dice. He'll want this 20 on account, off the 40 I owe him. Clean up your debt first, he'll say, and you can have a spend. Yeah, but listen, Mac, give us a break. I might win 100, and I can pay you back in full. How do you expect me to get it if you won't give me a chance? And listen, even if I lose the 20, I won't owe you any more, and you've got a chance of taking 20. But he couldn't see McMurtry coming at that. He'd want the 20 off the debt because he wanted the debt settled. Horses. Been unlucky with them, right out of me stride lately. Dead unlucky, St. Malo ha. Beat that hairy goat, myself. That gull of a Pudden Williams, tell him anything. He'll do his $5 cold on that nag. Mug give him sop, and he's good for anything. He decided on the baccarat school, not Cheeseman's, because he owed Cheeseman 50 quid, but Harry's. Harry pulled the slinters too. He took their dough from the mugs, but he gave a few of the professionals a square deal. Harry was tough, though, hard as a stone, and Harry might wonder why he hadn't been near him much. Looked a bit funny to suddenly switch from Cheeseman's to Harry, but damn 'em, none of their business. You've got money to bet with, that's all that matters. Harry the gentleman nodded to him when he went through the rich curtains into the thickly carpeted room. It was all nice and respectable. Even the two bouncers wore dress suits. They stood beyond Harry, their arms folded, talking. Harry was large and tuxedoed. His hair was going back, and his forehead was polished like mogul wood. Dano was very amiable. "Going to break you tonight, Harry. I wish you luck." Harry smiled. "Thanks," Dano said. "Say, where's Cuddy Peters?" "I don't see him around." Cuddy went through, Harry said casually. "You don't tell me. Best banker you ever had." "Trick perfect. You must miss him, Harry." "In a way," Harry admitted, pouting indifferently. "Took 500 smackers with him when he cleared. That was his trick. Ours hasn't been taken yet." Dano was astounded and looked it. "You mean he done a bunk with 500 quid? What a mug. Didn't know what a good wicket he was on. Where's he gone? What's happened to him?" "We're looking," Harry the gentleman said, nodding at a furred woman and a wealthy-looking playboy who had just come in. "Hell, I wouldn't like to be in his shoes when you catch up with him." "No," Harry sighed distantly, then smiled his snaky smile and excused himself to go and meet the newcomers. They were coming in, filling up the room, drifting into the next, where the bar was, over the luxurious carpets, standing against the fine paneling, around the neat center-striped tables. The place would be dense in the later hours. After 12, they'd pour in and laugh and smoke and drink and win and lose and lose. Dano felt an uncertain tension ease in him after his chat with Harry. Sorry Cuddy's gone, though. Could have been sure of a fair go from him. He picked out the next best man, in his opinion. Speed Drew, a lithe, lizard-like fellow who was dealing the cards at the corner table. He didn't like Drew, but he liked him better than the others. He nodded to Speed, and Speed's shiny, lacquered head tilted slightly. Dano sat down and put a fiver on the left side. He lost. He tried another fiver on the center line, and the bank won again. Then his luck changed swiftly, magically. He won 50 in the next 10 minutes, and another 10. He was sitting pretty with 150. Excitement rushed through him, and doubt. Take it and get out. No, your luck's in. Play it, keep on playing it. You'll take 1,000 at this rate. You'll walk out of here rich. On a gambling impulse, he played the 150 and watched Speed Drew flick out the cards, and he watched his cuff to see if he pulled a card from there. And one of the players asked for another card, and he got it, and the suspense lingered. And Dano saw Speed Drew turn up the cards, and he knew he'd lost. And he stared at the table and watched the money leaving him, dead and gone in a few minutes. He pushed his chair back and stepped out, and a fat woman with blue hair and expensive jewelry bustled in and sat down. Dano watched the play, and he saw her lose 200, but she only laughed in her fat throat, and the ring on her chubby finger flashed 20 times, and every time a diamond. He edged away, feeling he didn't belong there, feeling like a hobo surrounded by wealth that he couldn't touch. Luck into, if I hadn't made that splash, just bet 50. Watched that luck and taken it along instead of letting it take me. Too late now, but 150. I should have got out with it. Funny luck changing so fast like that, though. That woolly squirt Drew might have pulled a fast one. Too fast for me, maybe, but he could have. Luck shouldn't run out like that. He turned and looked at Drew's glossy, sleek head, and suspicion fixed itself in his mind. Harry came past, and Dano acted on impulse, touched Harry's sleeve. Harry turned, smiling, the smile for the person he was with, but still on his turned face. "Can I see you a minute, Harry?" Harry excused himself politely, and Dano followed him over to a quieter corner. Harry had no intention of showing his perspicacity. Dano had to start off on one knee. "Listen, Harry, I'm flat. 150 quid just done the lot, and I'm skinned out." "Oh, that's bad luck," Harry said gently. "Bad luck." Dano went down on both knees. "Don't suppose it would be much use biting for a loan, Harry?" "Not much," Harry said calmly. "Say 20, Dano plugged. "Even 10, that'd do. You'll get it back in a few days. What about it, Harry?" "No," Harry said. Dano got up off his knees, his eyes blazing fiercely. "Shouldn't have asked the bludger. Knew I shouldn't have asked him." He kept some control of himself. "I've done a lot of dough with you, Harry. I suppose if old Muggets over there goes shy of coin, you'll dock him a couple of hundred, just like that." "That's right," Harry nodded in his gentlemanly way. "A lousy tenner, that's all I ask." "You should try Cheeseman," Harry said, and the way he said it informed Dano that Harry knew of his debt to Cheeseman, and he burst out, "Has that fat blob put me in here?" "It's time for you to leave," Harry told him. "Blackballed me, didn't he? The rat. Not that it would make any difference to you. A man would have to dissect you to find a tray bit." His control snapped completely. "And listen, if you want to know something, I think I've been chiseled. I don't like the way me luck run out suddenly, and I think that twicer you've got over there had something to do with it." He sharped on me. Harry had nodded. A hand fastened on Dano's arm. He jerked his arm free, and his face was blazing passionately. Harry gave a further flick with his head, and the two bouncers grabbed Dano roughly by the shoulders, and he looked up sharply into their faces, hard cauliflower ears, flattened noses, and frightened caution. Weirded the torrent of his rage, and he stood in shaking quiet. "Good night, Harry," the gentleman said, smiling, and turned smiling at the gathering, signaling them to go on with their interest, and moving charmingly among them. The two bouncers walked like bastions beside Dano, through the curtained door and out onto the landing, and they roughed him down the stairs, and one of them pulled his nose, twisting it, and jerked his hand off it, and the other jolted an elbow into his ribs and grunted as he jolted, and gave him a swinging backhander over the head. And Dano knew better than to try to fight back, giving them the impetus to beat him up properly. They shuffled him over the floor of the factory up to the door watcher. "This mug don't get in no more, Arch," they told the door watcher. And the door watcher opened the little door, and the bouncers pushed Dano through it, and the door shut, and he was left to find his way across the allotment into the alley. He staggered down there, and he sat on the curb, his nose paining as if it had been stung by nettles, water streaming from his eyes, his ribs sore, and his head singing from the blow, his spirit raging, and a blasphemous soliloquy tumbling from his lips. He felt bad next morning, and he lay in bed. Chris came in jovially with his breakfast on a tray and a morning paper, and he raised himself in bed and said, "You should have been a mother, Chris." Chris glowed and laughed loudly and said, "For my friend, only the best," and Dano looked down at the tray, steak and eggs and chips, and plenty of well-buttered bread. "Hell, Chris, that's what I call a pal. You get home pretty late, eh?" "I don't know, sometime this morning," Dano said, with a wry grin. He shrugged his shoulders. "Had a lousy night, Chris. Done the whole 20, and he looked up quickly at Chris's face, and Chris's face bulged out its bottom red lip and squinched its eyes. Chris shook his head. Maybe it'd be a good idea to stop that gambling, Dano. Where would I be if I gamble, eh? Yeah, maybe you're right, Dano said, feeling slightly disturbed. Never mind, you'll win him around. He's a born sponge, and you can squeeze him for a lot more yet before he dries up. What's doing in the rag, he said, slapping the paper open. Things don't look so good over the other side, Chris said. That Hitler somebody ought to shoot the loony. That's what I say. He's all bull, Dano said, turning the sheets and arriving at the turf guide. And the quicker they call his bluff, the better. He folded the paper into tabloid size and put it beside him while he ate. Chris Casamatis suddenly clapped his hands together and said with a peal of excitement in his voice, Dano, you know what I see in the paper? Singers. They want singers for the radio. Yeah? Show me, Chris cried, snatching up the paper and turning the pages while his eyes jumped all over the print. They going to make operas, put them on. Madame Butterfly, Ada il Trovatore, all of them, and they want singers where I see that now. Ah, there she is, look. He pushed the paper under Dano's nose, and Dano read the half-column advertisement. You should be a cert for that, you think? Right up your alley. Sometimes, you know, I think I'm not so good. He gestured. Don't be silly, Chris. You just don't know how good you are. You haven't had the breaks, that's all. I got nowhere in the amateur hour, Chris pointed out, a trifle dolorously. Yeah, and you know why, don't you? I told you why. Nerves. You were so nervous I thought you had a pneumatic drill in your hand. You just weren't Chris Casamatis at all. But a pretty poor ring-in for Chris Casamatis. But you don't want to run away with the idea that because you were nervous you haven't got a voice. I told you that before, didn't I? Yeah, you tell me, Chris said. And I know that's right. That microphone thing. It was all strange to me. Just the same, Dano, I think I need more practice, more teaching. They can teach me no more here. His eyes sparkled. Listen, what I'm going to do, I think about it, the end of the year, when I make a bit more money, I go to Italy and study, and then I come back here. And I bet I sing at the town hall. How much you bet? Not a bean, because you'd only win anyway. Dano laughed. Yes, son, that's a great idea. With that voice of yours, good now, but polished up by a top-line teacher, you'll be another Caruso. Nothing sure. Chris Casamatis laughed with elation, and he ran his voice up the scale and down again and clapped his hands together, and Dano nodded encouragingly at him. Poor simple bastard, like a kid, just like a kid. Dano made a joke, and I might even go along with you as your manager. That took Chris' breath away, and a shout of delight, and he gave Dano a slap on the back and stood off, his face a mask of glee, and cried, The very thing, oh wonderful, yes. Dano shrugged his shoulders and jabbed and won at Chris' wide-open defense. Get out, I'm only kidding. You wouldn't have enough coin to take us both. Chris' face changed to a foxy shrewdness, and he held up one finger for emphasis. Don't you make no mistakes about that, he chuckled. I don't spend my money, I save my money. And when I'm ready, I sell my shop too, and get plenty more money. We go like aristo something, all posh tog, you know, and the best seats on the boat. He laughed, exhilarated, and Dano laughed at the comicality of his enthusiasm, and the good relieving news about his finances. Dig meself in here, all right, feed this bloke the sugar, and you never know where I'll be in 6 months' time. And he saw a way out of his debts. Put the nips into Chris, take him nice and steady, and bite deep. Pitch the woe, build up the scene, and Chris walks on like a crusader and saves the world. Dano felt good. Next morning he was standing at the door front watching the scenery from hocks to bosom and feeling at peace with the world. When he saw the last man in the world he wanted to see, quick, duck back inside. No, you can't. Now he's seen you. Give him the smile and welcome, put the mat down, and roll out the carpet. Well, strike me dead, look who it is, Dano said heartily, putting out his hand. The limp hand took it and let itself be shook. How's tricks? Said Frankie Lawver. Fine, Frankie. Hell, I'm glad to see you. What about a drink? I'll eat first, Lawver said. I'm empty. He walked past Dano into the shop and sat down in one of the cubicles. Dano looked after him, stubbled chin, dowdy clobber, and was worried, but followed up and said, Sit tight, and I'll get Chris to work. And he walked down and bent under the counter and found Chris in the kitchen, and told Chris to slap up a good feed for Frankie Lawver. Chris showed his temper, but Dano said, For me, Chris, just this once, and I'll get rid of him. And Chris said, grouchily, All right, but I don't want that crook in my shop. Dano got his talk in order, composed himself. Fancy this bludger turning up, and right now too, at this time. Gotta face it, though, he went back smiling and sat down in the cubicle and pulled out his cigarettes and tossed the packet to Lawver. And Lawver took one slowly, and Dano lit it, and Lawver dragged on the cigarette, and the smoke spurted from his nostrils. How's Melbourne, Frankie? Dano asked amiably. I was only thinking the other day, I'll bet Frankie's fixed himself up with some cop job down there. He'd have been back long ago if the pickings were no. Things didn't pan out too well, Lawver said, breaking in with a slight impatience, Dano thought. Sorry to hear it, Dano said. Didn't you start that back school you were going to start down there? You were flush when you left here. I thought you couldn't go wrong. I kicked her off all right, Lawver said, without humor. Had her going well, some crab potted us, and the cops raided the joint, skinned me for everything. He went on talking, not giving too many details, and Dano thought, Sound like you're lying. How do I know you started that school? Maybe you did and come a gutser. Maybe you didn't and just done your money some other way. Had close on 1,000 when you left here. Wouldn't be surprised if you slapped it into something else, and something else went bung. Only had her set up a month when the bulls got in, Lawver said. What have you been doing then? Dano asked. In the last 5 months, I mean. Just scratching. Had some irons in the fire, but they went cold. Chris came with a hefty feed, and Lawver didn't even look at him. He didn't look up till Chris walked off, and then he looked at Chris's back. He put his head down, stubbed out his cigarette, and took up his knife and fork. Going to give this old town another look over, eh, Frankie? Lawver nodded, eating. He looked straight into Dano's eyes, stopped chewing. Got some plans, he said. Some connections. I'll need dough. He put his head down, chewing. You're stony, are you? Flatter than a chow's bum. It won't take you long to get on your feet again, Dano said enthusiastically, warily. You can't keep a good man down. He grinned at Lawver. Lawver didn't meet the grin. Dano pulled out another cigarette, drew his breath in, and looked sober. I need about 150, Lawver said, eating. Dano's eyes narrowed and lit, and Lawver said, without looking up, How soon can you do it? Hell, Frankie, Dano said, you've caught me on the hop. Been having a pretty tough trot myself lately. Bloody horses, cards, back. Luck's been right out. I owe money, and I've been trying to pull it up. I could use it in a couple days, Lawver said, ignoring his explanatory pleas. Dano's voice became edged with anger. I can't do it, Frankie. I haven't got it. Give me a couple months, and that'll be more like it. Lawver looked up. His face was hard and set. Listen, Dano, he said. I'm on me acre, and why should I be? You've got 150 quid belonging to me, and I'm not rolling around any gutters eating out of any garbage cans when I've got money coming to me. I want that money, and you'll have to get it. Hell, you're all right, Dano thought. Big feller going away to Melbourne. Never mind that, kid. Shoot it along when you've got it. I won't whinge if I don't see it for a year. Slap on the back, the little smile that was a big smile for the unsmiling lobber. The big shot with the hip pocket well padded. Who's worrying about chicken feed like that? Chances are I'll never need it. Forget it. Dano grumbled. You make it hard, Frankie, and there's not a hope in the world of me getting 150 in 2 days. But I can give you a bit to go on with. I'll get your money all right somehow, but you'll have to give me a chance. I'll give you a tenner to help out, and maybe another tenner in a few days' time. How'll that do you? I'll give you a week to get it, Lobber said. Where's the tenner? Dano kept control of himself. He said, a little stiffly, hang on a jiff. He went down the back and into the kitchen again. Chris was hard at it cleaning, for the inspector was due around about this time. And Dano said, Chris, can you lend me a tenner? Chris said, sure, Dano, she's right. And then, as Dano turned, he grabbed Dano's arm. What not for him? Dano's look was his answer, and Chris said, no fear, no tenners for that crook, not my money. You tell him what I say, and tell him not to come here asking money, or I get the police quick and busy. Keep your voice down, Chris, Dano said, grimacing. Listen, he didn't come here asking for money. I owe him that tenner. He helped me out once when I was in a bad spot, and I owe him the tenner. See, I want to pay him, Chris, and get rid of him. Chris was furious, and he didn't know about it. No, I don't like that crook, and I never did, but Dano worked on him persuasively. It's for me, Chris, and you want to get rid of him. And I want to do that, too. Come on, be a sport. And Chris gave in grudgingly. He went through to the till and gave Dano the money and glared at Lobber, and walked back into the kitchen, peering around the curtain from time to time. There you are, Dano said. Lobber casually picked up the tenner and shoved it in his inside pocket. I can do a lot with that brick, and a damn sight more with the other 14 like it, I expect, at the end of a week. I'll do the best I can, Frankie. Give us another one of your smokes, Lobber said. Help yourself, Dano said, giving him the packet. He sat down, but he didn't want to talk any more. I could smash you over the bloody head, you big stand-over mug. Bull artist, you and your not minding jail. Haven't got enough brains to keep out of jail, leading me around, showing me the haunts here and there, knocking me down to the big smells. I owe you nothing. I'd have got around to that myself in time. Getting me a fair go here and there, I'd have got myself a fair go. I owe you nothing at all. Lobber smoked thoughtfully for a few minutes, and he said, nodding his head slightly towards the kitchen, and pretty sweet with the Dago, eh? I got a room here now, Dano said, a little hesitantly. That's matey, Lobber said, and Dano didn't like the way he said it, and he knew Lobber was thinking of how easy Chris was to the touch. Just put the acid on him, and he walks to the till and pulls out the tenner. I'll give you a tip, Frankie, Dano said. Chris doesn't like you coming in here. Well, we don't want trouble, and he'll make trouble if you keep coming. If I've got to meet you, I'll meet you somewhere else, down the town somewhere. If the greasy sod ever makes trouble for me, Lobber said calmly, it'll be the biggest blue he's ever made. Well, yeah, I know how you feel, but it's no sense getting in his hair when there's no need to. Make it Ike's billiard room, Dano said. I'll see you there. Lobber nodded and stood up. He picked up Dano's packet of cigarettes and put them in his pocket. I'll keep these, he said. You can get plenty more, he added meaningly. You'll take care of that feed, too, will you? Dano nodded, angry, miserable, but with a smiling face. Ike's Wednesday, about 11, Lobber said, and strolled out. Dano let him get out. Then he went to the door and watched him going down the street towards Railway Square, and he knew him for what he really was, A proper bad bastard of all that bad luck, the smell turning up now. He walked back into the shop, anxious, irritable, and went up to his room and lay on the bed. 140 quid in a week. Where the hell are you going to get that, Chris? Chris will never come across, especially if he knows it's for Lauber, and he's immoral to wake up. Just have to try and bleed it out of him in bits. Get that other tenner and keep Lauber quiet with it, and maybe he'll be in a better mood, and maybe you'll be able to talk him into taking it in bits. When he met Lauber on the Wednesday, Lauber, he thought, was better looking, wearing a fairly good gray suit, shaved haircut. No doubt, he thought, he's been on the bulge among his other fellow few coppers. With him were his two muscle men, boys who had seen Humphrey Bogart too often nap in hips. They left the billiard room and went down the street into a wine bar near the quay. Dano handed over the money and started in on his spiel, encouraged by Lauber's easier grace, but he was pulled up short, and Lauber told him with a light thump on the table that he'd made the rules and he wanted the rest of that money by Sunday. Dano sipped his wine and looked uncomfortably in turn from Lauber to Knapp and Hips, and saw that their faces were as hard and implacable as his. What Hitler wouldn't give to have those two big boneheads in uniform. Wouldn't they crack the whip? Listen, Frankie, you might as well give me what you're going to give me now. I can't get that money by Sunday. You can't? That's right, I can't. There was silence, and Dano felt a nervous fear creep up out of his bowels and settle in his throat, and it showed like pain at the back of his eyes. He looked around at the cool green floor and shiny taps and bottles, the few drinking at the bar, the old hags and red-nosed blottos at the tables, and one old-timer with rattled cheeks came up to them, and she had a tough-looking younger piece with her, a piece with "Keep Out, This Means You" written all over her. And the old-timer put her hand on Lauber's shoulder and said affectionately, "What about cutting us in, Dreamboat? How's about a drink for the girls? Huh?" Lauber said, "Go to hell," and he tried to go on talking, but the affronted woman stood off and started to abuse him, and the piece with her went up and sat on a chair and crossed her legs gawking and chewing her face up, and Dano's eyes went to her legs and then to her face, and her face said, "Yeah, just have a go, Mug, and see." And he thought, "You scroucher, you tart." Her mate, the old roughie, was telling the world what she thought of stingy hounds, and getting so bad that she threatened to slam them at any moment with her bag. Lauber stood up and said, "Let's get out of here before I do me block with this old dippo." And they got up and went, and the screeching abuse followed them, and the sun was warm, and Dano felt a certain relief and felt glad of the interruption. But it wasn't for long. Lauber kept walking, and they walked down George Street North, and they sat on the long platform on the wharf shed, and he rolled a cigarette, and Dano felt the fear crawl in him again, and he pulled out his cigarettes and said, "Have a tailor-made." But Lauber ignored him. The two tough boys helped themselves, though, and Dano had 2 long draws on his fag before Lauber spoke. "Listen," he said, "I told you I wanted that money by the end of the week, and I do. And if you can't get it, I'll get it, and you'll help me." "What do you mean?" Dano said. "You're a gutless mug," Lauber said, "and by rights I ought to fix you, but I'll give you a chance." Dano was stung with anger, but he didn't show it. His voice came out slightly high-pitched. "What is it? That Greek bastard don't open on Sunday nights, does he?" "That's right." Dano nodded. "What's he do?" "He goes to bed, he listens to the radio, and he goes to bed." "What time?" "Early, 8:30 regular." "Hey, but wait a minute, you don't think I'm going to go the knock on his?" "You're not, no. but I ought to make you," Lauber said, keeping the threat in his voice. "You're getting out of it pretty easy. All you're going to do is come down and open the side door and let us in." Dano stared at him. "But what happens when they find—" "What happens? Listen to him." The tough boys sneered toughly. Lauber said, "Leave the door unlocked ajar. Go back to bed again. That's all you do. We'll do the rest. But them coppers are not mugs altogether. They'll wake up somebody, let you in." "That's a Yale lock on that door, ain't it? Couldn't I have a key? And you're so thick with that Greek he'd fight off police dogs to protect you." "But listen," Dano tried desperately. "He's got no money in the shop. He banks it." "Since when?" Lauber asked with a jeer. "He's pretty handy pulling them tenors out, and I got eyes. So have these boys. I'll settle for what's in that till." Dano knew he was right. Chris was very haphazard with banking his money. Anybody had only to buy a milkshake and get change, and he'd see the flat pile of notes in the till. "You don't get no cut, though," Lauber said. "You know that." "Yeah, that'll put you in the clear," Lauber said. "The debt'll be wiped. I'm helping you to help me get it, and you ought to jump at it," he pointed out. Dano listened, considering. Then he smiled. "Okay, Frankie, it's a deal." Lauber nodded, and Dano noticed a slight seep of relief in his face, a slight relaxation of the shoulders, and Lauber said, "Anybody else but you, and I wouldn't do 'em a favor like this, putting me neck out just to get dough that's owed to me. I reckon you're lucky, eh, boys?" The boys nodded, and Hip said gravely, "Damn lucky if you ask me." Lauber said, "Okay, now, listen. I'll see you at Ike's Saturday afternoon, and we'll fix the time for this thing, right?" "Yeah, all right," Dano said. He left them, but he didn't go immediately back to the shop. He had a beer and wandered aimlessly thinking. He wandered into Hyde Park and sat on the seat there and worked out his rage and hate. "Doing me a favor. Must think a man's a complete Alec. Born yesterday," and he felt angry against Chris Casamatas for having the money. "And listen, all right for that mug to make the plans and say you won't be suspected. Who's he with the bossing? Using me, that's all. Giving me that meadow mayonnaise about me being lucky. Kidding me I ought to be grateful. Using me." He left the park and sauntered down to George Street and took a tram back to the shop. Chris greeted him with a letter. Chris excited, Chris half joking on the words, waving the letter and saying the radio people wanted him to go along for an audition, falling over himself and saying this was his chance, and he would show them, and he would get picked for the operas. And Dano was enthusiastic for him, and before he knew it, he would be a star. Somebody was bound to pick him out and say what a singer he was, and he would be famous. Famous before you knew it. Christoforos Casamatas, the great tenor. It's a great opportunity, and attaboy, Chris. He went up and lay on the bed, thinking. He felt discontented and didn't know what to do with himself. The trouble was great in him, and he wanted to escape from it. And he thought he wanted a woman, but hell, what's the use of a woman? And he ended up dragging the rest of the day. And he went out after tea and picked up some little strumpet in bangles and bows with a pout of a mouth dipped expertly in scarlet paint. And he took her over to Luna Park and came back with her and took her up into the domain. Afterwards he got up and walked off and left her and passed St. Mary's Cathedral and held on to a memory and thought of going in, but went on down King Street and went back to the shop and went to bed. Chris Casamatas was singing early in the morning, and it was breakfast and bed again, and the routine again. "When do you go, Chris?" "Well, Monday will be the red letter day, Chris, and we'll put on a celebration, just you and me. Chris, wine for two. They'll pick you for sure, Chris. It's in the bag, and then watch your steam, eh, Chris?" He watched Chris go out, and he ate his breakfast and thought, and the idea shaped up. He pushed it away, and it came back again, and he held it and looked at it and turned it over, and added and subtracted from it, shortened and extended it, and it was with him all day, and he began to see it as the right idea, the way out, and he felt pleased with himself, and a little demonstratively exuberant even, and he thought of a bit of syrup he was with last night, and the delight she gave him was even better now than it had been last night. He went hunting again, and he got something a bit fancier this time, a teaser type, but she was one he could tell the boys about, and he came home and let himself in the side door with the key. The light in Chris's room was up, and Chris came out as Dano reached the top of the stairs, and Chris was slump-shouldered and quieter than Dano had ever known him. And Chris said, "Well, how you like it? Hey." "What's the matter, Chris? What are you talking about?" "The news. This Hitler in Poland. What do you think of that?" Dano gaped at him, and he said he hadn't heard anything. Chris went with him into his room, talking and telling about it, and saying, "I don't like the looks of it, Dano. Maybe nothing will happen, but if they all get into it, where's my trip to Italy?" "Up the spouts." And Dano said, "Where are you worrying about?" "What are you worrying about? Germans stuck into Poles. It'll be all over even before it started. I'll bet you 10 bob to a bronze you'll get to Italy. More 10 quid to a bronze." And he put some heart into Chris, and Chris went off to bed. And Dano didn't think about it again. He lay working on his idea, and it was better than ever. He met Lauber on Saturday, and the arrangements were finalized. About 9:45 slip down, unlock that door, leave it ajar. We'll be there about 10, in and out before the quarter after. You know what to do. Yeah, Dano thought, I know what to do. He took an interest in Chris' takings for Saturday and Sunday, and when Chris shut the shop at 6 on Sunday evening, they had tea together, and Chris seemed cheerful and dispirited by turns. "Tomorrow the big day, eh? I wonder what old Chamberlain going to say tonight. I sing like I never sing before, Dano. Nervous? No, that's all gone. I hope this old Chamberlain got good news tonight." Dano looked suddenly at him. "Hell, what's this? I never thought of that would be tonight." He said, "You're not going to stay up and listen to that broadcast, Chris?" "Good God, yes. I got to hear. But it won't be through till about 11 o'clock. "I know, but I going to sit up." Dano thought fast, worked hard. "But listen, that's crazy. You always go to bed early Sunday night, always like to get your rest. Other Mondays you don't sing. Tomorrow you've got to sing. You need your rest more than ever needed it before." Chris considered. "I think I'll be all right." "Chris, you won't. You're not going to ruin your chances just to hear a Prime Minister thousands of miles away yap his head off, are you? You can read about it tomorrow." "Look, I'll listen for you. How's that? I'm not going out. I was, but I won't now. I'll stay in and listen for you, and tell you what the old cow said first thing in the morning." Chris considered some more. "You want your throat in first-class fettle tomorrow." Dano rammed. "You get into bed and have a good night's sleep and put your radio in my room," he grinned. "Waiting. Now, that's doctor's orders, Chris." Chris said with a sudden laugh. "Righto, I'll read about it tomorrow." "No, we'll shift the radio, and I'll tell you first thing," Dano insisted, after they had finished eating. They talked a little and went up to Chris' room and detached the radio plug from the light socket and transferred it on the same principle to Dano's room. And Dano mentored Chris, soft-soaped him, manager, coach, and impresario. "Relax, Chris. Go to bed and sleep, and don't worry about a thing. You're a good feller," Chris Casamatis said, with his hand on Dano's shoulder. Dano told him to pull his head in and shuffled him off. Alone, the door shut, Dano moved towards the wall His expression changed. He listened. He lay on his bed, thinking. He walked the room. He lay down again. He heard Chris, bare feet on the floor, "Get into your pajamas, you mug," and hit the hay. He waited, looking at his watch. 8:30. He waited. He heard the light switch in Chris' room, the creak of the bed, and the tossing of the bed. Silence. "Now you got everything right. Check it. Go downstairs. Soon as he's off, go downstairs. Get the money out the side door. Leave it pulled to unlock. Get down the street into a phone box. 5 to 10 ring the cop shop. Just seen 4 blokes breaking into Chris Casamata's shop. 4 blokes. Looks like they're going to burgle the joint. 4 of 'em. Mustn't forget to ram it home about the 4. Harp on the 4. Coppers get the squad car down there in 2 ticks. Lobber and his gallets in the shop, trapped, benched. Where's the 4th bloke? Not there. The 4th bloke's got the dough then, because the dough's gone, and it's not on any of the 3 birds. But don't take all the dough, only some a whack of it. Chris will be woken. Yeah, he'll be downstairs, and he'll expect you down, but you don't turn up. You come in about 10 to 11. You don't know anything about what's happened. You're staggered, amazed, furious when he tells you. You say, "I just went out for a breather, just a walk. Got bored sitting around waiting for that broadcast, and thought I'd take a stroll and get back round about 11, just before it was due to come through, because I promised you I'd listen. Hell, Chris, this is bloody terrible." "Yeah, that'll do." 9 o'clock, quiet in Chris's room. Then the bed creaked. Just my luck if he didn't get to sleep. 9:15, Chris coughed slightly. At 9:30, Dano switched off the light, muffling the sound with a towel. He waited, stunning. He slowly opened the door, closed it. He waited. He sneaked down the stairs, and then he was in the shop. And he walked quick and soft to the till, and opened it, muffling the clang with his coat, then waiting till the silence came together around him again. He stuffed the notes into his pockets. There was a sound on the stairs, light, slight. He ducked down. There was silence. He turned to the till again. There was a click, and a pull of light hit the counter at the end of a beam, and the beam was on the stairs, and Chris Casamata cried, "Who's that?" And his feet slapped down the stairs, and the light hit Dano in the face, and he crouched like a startled rabbit, stiff in a glare of a headlight. And from beyond the torch, Chris Casamata shouted, "Dano! Dano, what are you doing?" And Dano knew he saw the money in his hand, and the horrified voice of Chris Casamata told him that Chris Casamata understood now why he had wanted to get him off to bed. And the vicious rage of a trapped animal surged through him, and he dashed along the counter, but Chris Casamata cried to him, and he was calling to him, "Costello, Dano, and what do you do this to me for? Dano, what do you do this to me for?" And he grabbed him and tried to hold him, but Dano punched him off, and Chris brought the heavy torch down, and it struck Dano's shoulder, and he was a madman with the pain, and he struck at Chris, and Chris fell back, and Dano burst through the door into the storeroom, and rushed to the side door and turned the knob. And Chris Casamata had him by the coat, and he turned to punch Chris, and they fell through the door out into the side lane. Dano smashed his fist into Chris Casamata's soft belly, and Chris Casamata was gasping and wheezing and moaning, saying, with shock in his voice, "You robbed me." But Dano was insane with violence, and he smashed his fist into the indefensible face, and Chris Casamata fell, and the first kick in the stomach winded him, and he tossed clumsily on his back like a beetle, winded him and sapped his power, and the second in the head slowed him still more, and the third stilled him. And Chris' bloody face was in the gutter, and the gutter water dammed up against it, shouldering its way around and gliding on. And Dano stopped and looked down petrified, and went down on his haunches looking, and he put his hand to Chris's heart and looked at the lopsided hang of his jaw, and his tongue blobbed out, and 2 of his teeth embedded in it, and The influence of the stillness struck a sudden fright in Dano and cooled the heat of his terrible savagery. He stood up and looked down the lane, and he saw 3 men coming towards him, dim shapes, and he saw them hurry, and he knew them, and turned and bolted, his feet crashing on the ground. He looked around and saw them running too, chasing him, and he knew Lauber knew he had been double-crossed. He pelted past a couple of men standing at the head of the lane, looking down, and he knew it wouldn't be long before the police were there. He turned up and rushed up and around the corner and across the road and swung on to a tram, pacing and left that in the silent gloom of Gleb. His mind was galloping, rushing from impulse to impulse. He rushed down into her street, and he found her house, and he panted and thumped on the door, and waited and knocked, and kept waiting and knocking, and he heard unshod feet in the hall, and she stopped on the other side of the door, and she called nervously, "Who is it?" "Is it you, Cassie? Who's that?" "It's me, Dano, Cassie. Got you to help me. I'm in trouble." "Let me in, Cassie, let me in." "There's no help here for you," she said. "Please, Cassie, please." "Get away," she said. And he heard her feet going back down the hall, and curved her veely, but lost no time getting on to the footpath. He ran down that dark street, and a taxi came prowling round the corner. And he whistled it and jumped in, and as he jumped in he saw Lauber and his mates stop 100 yards down the street and start running and whistling and calling the taxi. But Dano said, "Quick, get going." And the driver got going, and Dano got out at the cross and hurried the rest of the way to the bay and went up the stairs and knocked on the door of the flat, whispering hoarsely, "Nancy, let me in, sweetheart, it's Dano." Feet were coming, the door unlocking, the knob turning, the door opened. He went to barge through, but a man blocked the long slit, and the man pushed a hand in his face and said, "Not so fast, ape," and Dano fell back, and at the man's shoulder he saw the vicious, triumphant face of the woman, and she said, "Let him have it, Jack." The man advanced on the landing. "You don't want trouble. You've got enough. Get moving." And Dano ran down the stairs and out into the street. He stood on the footpath, lost. Chris, I didn't mean it. You asked for it. I didn't mean it. If the police never get you, Lauber will. Somewhere, anywhere. Down the street, keep going. What about them? They'll help. Up here, keep in the dark. Don't walk too fast. They asked you to come back, Johnny said. Mum's fretting her heart out. Come home. Past the hospital, come home. They'll help. Across the street, who's that? What's he looking at? Come here, nothing, come home. And she opened the back door to the urgent banging and gave a cry, and Costello stared and was speechless. And Dano said, "Well, don't stand there gaping like I was hell itself. Shut the door." And he slammed it shut himself and went through into the dining room, and they followed, and his mother stood away, shocked by the change in him. And he breathed hard and said, "You've got to help me." And Costello's gorge came up in him. "You're not wanted here. Get out." "Peter, don't talk to him like that. It's not true." "I'm in trouble. You've got to help me. They're after me." Who's after you?" she said, dismay beginning on her face. "The police," he half shouted. Costello moved towards him. "So it's come to this, has it? Police, eh? Dano, what is it? What happened?" Dano's face was working, sweating, his eyes wild. He said harshly, "I killed a man. I didn't mean to. I don't know how it happened. But you got to help me, Mom. Do you hear?" He addressed himself to his mother, appealing to her with his eyes and his manner, sensing the rising hostility in his father, the hard wall of steel and rock around his heart. "But Dano, how, Miss Costello's face was sallow and alarmed and horrified. "There's no time for talking," Dano cried. "Hide me somewhere. They'll be coming, and they might come here." Costello went around the table. "You gutless cur, you kill a man and run home. Where's your pals?" he sneered. "The height of you coming here with your troubles, bringing it on our heads. Why did you come here? Isn't it one of the first places they'd look? Didn't you know that? Haven't you the brains to realize it was better to stay away anywhere but here? Yes, but there's witnesses to say I'm not living here, and if they come and you tell them you know nothing about me, they'll go. And all I ask you to do is hide me here for a while." "Ah, you make me spew," snarled Costello, with infinite contempt. you'd drag us into this. You'd think nothing about that. Get to your stinking cronies." Miss Costello clutched her husband's arm and stood between him and the boy. "Where would you go? Where? This is your own flesh and blood you're talking to, Peter. And him in trouble, where on earth is he more likely to go than his own home?" "You rotten, hopeless waster," cried Costello. "Peter, be quiet. I'm ashamed of you. He'll find his soul, the priest says. He'll find his soul in the pig bucket." Costello spat it out. "I'll not help you. You can get out of me house as quick as you come into it." "You haven't got the guts to help me," snarled Dano, his anger rising. "Guts, is it? And you the one to talk. Who had the guts to bring you into a world that fed on spuds and porridge and had no promise of anything but drudgery and poverty? Peter, will you stop? Who had the guts to risk a good life for a stinking bit of garbage like you? Your mother's got guts, this much guts. Even if she'd known what you was to become, she'd have had you just the same. She wouldn't have held you back. A damned pity she didn't." Miss Costello turned sharply and slapped his face, and he stumbled slightly from the shock of it. "I'll not turn you away, Dano. I'll keep you here, and nobody'll touch you. I'll get up in the roof and you tell 'em you never saw me. I haven't been living here for months." And he walked quickly into the laundry, and his mother got a chair and hurried, and he climbed up, hurrying, and got through the manhole and said, "All right, get it out of here." And she hurried away with the chair and put it down near the radio where it had been, and picked up her husband's coat from the floor where it had fallen off the chair, and looked around in distress. And she saw him, Costello, sitting there quietly, his shaggy head bent, and she said, "I'm sorry for slapping you, Peter." He grunted and said, "You must be crazy. What good can you do? Only make it worse for yourself." But she couldn't see that he was right, and if she did, she didn't want to see it. "He's in trouble. He's my son. He needs help. He's asked me, and I'm his mother. And that's all there is to it, till we think it out and think what's best and what to do." And in 5 minutes there was a loud knock on the door, and Costello started up. The woman was flustered, but in a moment becalmed of necessity, and she went to the door and tried to keep the shake out of her voice. "Yes, what is it, Miss Costello?" "Yes, please. Your son, Dano, is he here?" No, he doesn't live with us. But what do you want with him? What's he done?" Costello appeared in the hall. "Bring the men in, Liz. Don't let them stand there. Come on in, Inspector, or Sergeant, or whoever it is." The heavy feet pounded through the hall, and the big men went into the dining room. Miss Costello followed, and looked in trepidation at her husband. Sergeant Bryce was talking, and he said they wanted to question Dano because a man was dead. But it couldn't have been Dano. He wouldn't harm a soul, Miss Costello said in a little voice. "I don't know about that," Bryce said, "but he was seen running from the lane 10 minutes before we got there." He looked around the room, and the woman's quick eyes darted with him nervously. "How was the man killed?" Costello asked quietly. "Kicked to death," Bryce said shortly. "What for?" "Robbery, it looks like." Bryce sighed. "Well, sorry to bother you." He turned to go, and the man with him was outside the door, and Bryce said, "Okay, Bill." Costello said, "Wait on, you won't have to search." And they turned around, and Costello said, "You'll find him through the manhole in the laundry." And his face was heavy and untriumphant, the mouth curved, the eyebrows beating. And when he had spoken, the policeman stared at him for a second, and then turned into the laundry, and the woman put a hand in her mouth and bit on it like a wounded animal, and she fell down on the chair and began to sob. And in the laundry they heard the voice of Bryce, "All right, Costello, the game's up, come on down." And the woman's voice was then shaken, "Your own flesh and blood, your own son. Costello, you hear me, come down." "I'll never forgive you," she sobbed, "never, never." "Costello, for the last time." No, the woman sprang up and ran into the laundry, but they didn't have guns in their hands yet. The image was in her mind. "Dano, come down, or they'll go up and shoot you. For the love of God, Dano, come down." And Dano said, muffled, after a pause, "Don't shoot, I'm coming." He opened the manhole, and looking down he saw the tall, sturdy men, the big faces, and the distraught face of his mother. Bryce said, "Now you're showing sense," and he nodded to the other to grab Dano's legs and help him down, and he said, "Don't try any monkey tricks, Costello, just come quietly." And Dano said, with bitter bravado as he came down, "Oh, you want to watch me. I'm the devil himself, I am. I'll vanish myself into thin air. I'll go through a crack in the floor." He looked at his mother, and his mouth trembled viciously. "Well, look at me. Aren't I something to look at?" And bitter tears sprang into his eyes, and he walked between the policemen into the dining room. His father looked up. He was like a statue, and he looked up and watched them. And Dano Costello, his face breaking into the face of himself, crying at 7 or 8, pointed in scornful triumph, "Look, that's me, father, the same that's hated me ever since he got me out of his system. That's me great, sweet father that would play Judas for the price of a son, the grudge artist, and the top-off." He burst towards his father, and his father stood looking at him, and he said one word softly. He said, "Dano, keep your filthy mouth shut on me name, you dirty stoolie. I'd like to fill your gob with teeth and blood." And there was fierce pugnacity in him, but the police grabbed and held his arms, and he was only free to spit, and he spat in the face of his father. Costello never moved an inch, just looked, and his mother threw her arms around Dano's neck and kissed him, but he jerked himself away, and Bryce said something, nothing, and they went down the hall, and the woman went after them, and she stood at the gate watching them get into the dark, sleek car, and the car going away, and the red tail light disappearing around the corner. She walked back into the room, and he was sitting there, Costello, with the spit still in his face, and murmuring soberly, "He hates me, but I did it. For the good of him, you'll tell me," flared the woman. But she knew he was right. Deep within her instinct she knew he was right, and she knew her emotion governed her. "God's truth, Liz, yes, I did, for his own good." She glared, trembling-lipped, at him, and he looked at her with his nostrils smarting and his throat hard and aching. "I did, Liz, I did. I seen him running from a police, a fugitive. They'd have got him in the end. You hate the boy, you ordered him out, you didn't want to help him." "That's not true. I don't hate him. I thought I was doing the right thing. You wanted him to know the lesson. You got your own back on him." "Well, I hope you're satisfied," she sobbed. "I hope you're satisfied," but she thought, "He feels it as much as I do." And he was thinking of Dano and of us all. And he's right, no good could have come of it. It was only storing up the trouble. But it's so bitter. Costello moved shambling across to her and put his rough hand on her shoulder. "Look, Mum, don't you be crooked on me, or I'll cut me bloody throat. I feel bad about it. Bad. Don't be at me, for God's sake. We've always stuck together through thick and thin, and taken the hurdles together. Don't turn against me now, will ya?" He sat down in the chair, and it was quiet in the room, save for the low-volume sound of the radio and the soft weeping of the woman, and he put his elbows on his knees and his head in his hands. "I don't know. What is this blight on our lives that come out here to this country for the good of ourselves, find nothing but misery? Looking for gold in the streets, I said. Gold in the streets, they said. Words, nothing more. Is there gold in that wet clay I'm digging with a bag over me shoulders in the wet? Is there gold in them punches that blind me boy? And the other spilling the blood of innocent men? And her wearing herself out? Do they pay her gold for that?" He imagined he heard Johnny, woken out of sleep, feet on the floor, groping for the door, and coming out with his red hair rumpled, and blinking, and looking at them, and seeing them in twilight, but seeing them. No, Johnny's not in there, over at McGettigan's, enjoying himself at McGettigan's. Good thing for Johnny, great thing. His wife brushed past him, going to the kitchen, and he looked up and looked down again. Been better off staying at home in the Irish country. Should have gone to America or Spain or Africa. Wonder would all this have happened. Took the wrong ship, the wrong road, no difference where you went. True what the priest said, you brought your destiny with you, but he said too, the end is not always where you see it to be. Miss Costello came in again from the kitchen, and she was calmer, and he said, "What are you doing, Mum?" "I'm going to make a cup of tea," she said. "The same old cup of tea, always on, no matter what comes or goes, always on." And he didn't hear what he had been waiting to hear, what he had sat down to listen to. Sit by it, keep it down, but keep an ear strained alert. And Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of England, said, "We are at war with Germany," but his voice was low in Costello's house, too low to be heard, and too insignificant to be heeded.